Right, and of course we want to buckle down to our discussion this morning. That is, of course, a story that really acts as a segue to our discussion today, getting to understand or to understanding this particular levy by the government. And we know the latest development as far as the injunction by the court is concerned. So the government may not go full steam ahead and try to deduct this come the end of the month. But where did this actually get started from, and where is it headed to? That is what we want to know this morning. And allow me to introduce our panelists who are here this morning. If you joined us at the top of the hour, I'd introduce to you Lee Karuri, who is the chairman of Resorts and Cities, and is a consummate architect as well. We have also a board member from the Federation of Kenya Employers. This is Mike Masharia. We do have with us as well Stanley Manduku, who is an advocate of the High Court. Also, we do have with us Patrick Obath, who is the vice chair of KEPSA Foundation, also managing partner at Adam Smith International. We're eagerly waiting for the principal secretary. This is of Ministry of Transport and Housing. This is Charles Hinga, to join us also in the course of a program, as he had promised actually to do so. But nonetheless, we continue with the conversation apace. First of all, let's just begin with you, Lee, on this particular development and what the courts did yesterday. Do you hail it as something that should have been done by the courts?
Let me first say this whole agenda of housing has been a key agenda for a long time. This is not the first time that the housing agenda has been discussed. Even the previous government efforts have been made, because the housing situation has been pending for a long time. And therefore, the idea of looking for solutions and trying to bring in the concept of a housing fund as a way of mobilizing resources, as a matter of principle, is a good idea. I think where the challenge is coming is how to operationalize and addressing the fears and the concerns of the stakeholders who are going to be involved, the employers and other people. And therefore, what you see and the reactions that you are getting means that several organizations, stakeholders, and the citizens have not fully understood how this will work, how it will be implemented, and how eventually it is going to benefit them. And those issues need to be addressed. And therefore, the organizations have a right to actually be understood and explained for, and therefore going to court was a symbol or a sign of people, institutions who want to be heard and who want a complete discussion for them to buy in and get confident. So what I would say is that this court ruling is part of the process of democracy, and it gives the government and all those institutions an opportunity to sit down and address the issues that are pertinent and have been raised, so that as we move forward, the confidence and the support for this program is complete. So that engagement and that complete discussion and a conversation until every institution says we are confident that it will work out well is important. Yes.
All right. Federation of Kenya employers have also, moved on to join the COTU's filing, of course, of a stay order on this particular development as well. And of course, you weighed in heavily on this. I haven't seen Jacqueline Mugo also on the screens, trying to make sure that this particular move by the government is not affected. But first of all, do you actually hail it, or do you think this is a salutary effort coming from the government itself?
Thank you, Dibal. First of all, the court action yesterday was not the first one.
Yes.
You will recall when the Finance Act was passed and signed into law by His Excellency the President, COTU, together with FKE, did move to court, and that was in December of 2018. And we got an order stopping the implementation of this levy as we know it. Those orders were extended earlier on in the year, and we were waiting for a mention of the court case on the 20th of May, only to be surprised by a KRA notice in the newspapers. However, even before that, there was a notice in the papers that was purporting to create an advisory board. That was sometime in January. And we did move to court challenging that. Then out of the blue, the notice was withdrawn. So we do support what COFEC did yesterday, but at the same time, it's not new. Now, on the other side of it is, as Lee has pointed out, it is the how. We, as a federation, were very excited when we saw the Big Four agenda unveiled. And we thought this is a very good idea for the development and social welfare of the people of Kenya. But how to go about it then? Every time there is a new government initiative, you propose a tax to employers. Every time there's a new government initiative, propose a tax to employees. We are finding ourselves in a situation where we are suffering from tax and levy fatigue.
Yes.
And I'll give you an example. We've just had the enhanced social security laws that was passed 2 years ago. There's a proposed National Hospital Insurance Fund enhancement. At the moment, we are talking about a housing levy, and every time you're talking about dipping more into the pockets
Yes.
of the employees and the employers. So it's becoming very, very difficult to invest in the country and also do business as an employer. The other thing is that we are seeing this tax as not being equitable. 1.5% to a maximum of 5,000 may appear a small amount to some people, but to your typical employer who's on a minimum wage, tell them to contribute an extra 5%, and the minimum wage is 15,000 shillings. How would that work as compared to a CEO of a big corporation who's earning 4 or 5 millions of shillings? That 5,000 shillings is nothing. So we are looking at a situation whereby we have more and more of employees being overburdened. And of course, it pushes the cost of doing business as employers. So we might find ourselves in a situation whereby we are discouraging investments, where people leave Kenya and seek investment opportunities in the region.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Let's see from Patrick Obath. Good morning.
Morning.
I'm good to see you. I know you are actually in transit. Yeah, I really pushed you to be here this morning as well.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. I think just taking from the previous two contributions, the objective is noble.
Yes.
It's very noble, and I think we've had institutions that have been put in place. The National Housing Corporation is a perfect example. That was supposed to actually build affordable housing for Kenyans for years. But why isn't it doing so? Why don't we have the National Housing Corporation involved in this?
Yes.
Right? That's the first thing. The second thing, if you're talking about a pool of money, and look at examples around the world where you've had successful, what I call build, rent, sell schemes. Go to Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew, 1961. He basically did exactly that. He set up a board, which is a National Housing Corporation equivalent, and then there was money available, which was basically from the Social Security Fund, and they built affordable housing, and it was affordable from two reasons. One, the cost of the houses and the people you targeted were right at the bottom. Very clear. And secondly, the cost of renting was much lower. And then when the person was able to buy the house they had rented, the interest rates that they were using at that time was actually moderated by the Social Security Fund. So it was a very low cost, loan that they got at that level. So if you have a properly structured, very, very visible and also trusted system, it's actually a great idea. But I think the issue of rushing and creating another levy, creating another body, creating a new thing for something that has been there for the last 30, 40 years, I think is really where somehow we lose the trust of the citizen of Kenya. We need to really just understand the need, understand the mindset of the person who is being addressed, and then do it. We have what are called these interlocking blocks. They can build a house at a very, very cheap price. And in fact, you could even get community groups to start building houses for each other over time. So is affordable housing targeted at urban centers, or is affordable housing targeted at the total Kenya population? Right? And I think we really need to understand, because if you're talking about 500,000 houses a year,
Yes.
if you go and start doing very simple interlocking blocks in the rural areas and give people good housing instead of mud huts and wherever it is, you will hit that number within a very short time by getting that kind of activity happening. So people will get affordable housing in those areas. When you come to the urban areas, you begin to look like they've done in other areas, where you go out of the urban areas and you go maybe Kitengela and beyond, and you build the same kind of housing which is affordable in those areas, but then the investment will be in infrastructure of getting people in and out of the cities. So I think there just needs to be a complete relook at the way and method of achieving this. How can we integrate affordable housing into other ways of creating better urban spaces, right? Which we need to start doing.
Thank you.
So I just think it's a great idea, but we need to go back to the drawing board and begin to see how we can actually implement it.
Let's just hear also from Stanley Manduku, the social acceptance of this particular initiative as well. It seems, yeah, there's a frosty reception to it because many people don't really have an understanding, and the government has done such a poor sucky job in trying to, also educate the public as far as this funding is concerned. So maybe that's why we're seeing all this frosty reception as well. But the social acceptance angle of it, maybe you can contribute to that and also give a broader overview of what you think about the levy itself.
Okay, thank you very much. As it has been said, the idea is noble. However, the implementation bit is what is bringing in quite a number of issues. Now, I think there are 5 key things that the government or the implementers needed to really look at.
Yes.
And this is what is emerging from the various discussions that we've had and the various comments that various individuals have given. One, the aspect of social acceptance. We are looking at, was there adequate public participation? Are people convinced of this particular project? There are issues of, is it reasonable in the circumstances under which it's being implemented? Are the maths, is the math making sense? Secondly, we have got the issue of governance.
Yes.
The governance question is a very big concern, especially at a time whereby we are having all these corruption-related issues that are affecting various government bodies and entities. And as such, very many people are quite skeptical about the safety or the security of their money. And this position is even worsened by the fact that the penalties that have been stipulated in the legal notice are they're very, very lenient. Thirdly, there's the issue of whether this is a priority item for Kenyans, especially looking at it at the backdrop of the fact that Kenyans are heavily taxed. And then secondly, the purchasing power of Kenyans is quite eroded. So people are really wondering, is this a priority for me? The other issue that you have to look at is the issue of the guarantee of benefit.
Yes.
After somebody has contributed for all this time, we are talking about 500,000 houses.
Yes.
We are talking about a population of 3 million contributing. If you look at it, you realize that not every other person will be able to get. So they go to a situation whereby you do not have a guarantee that even after making this particular contribution, you'll be able to get a unit. So that one also is something that needs to be really looked at. And then also, look at the aspect of need from the various perspectives. You may realize that most of the people who are being targeted for this particular levy own houses. They live somewhere. The others also, they enjoy some very good house allowance. So to them, it's really not a concern. It's really not a need as such.
Yes.
The other people who are servicing mortgages, and then you wonder, what is the reasonableness for them being involved in this particular scenario where ordinarily, they will, after they complete their mortgage, they will not need this particular house. We also have these other home ownership schemes that are working. And most Kenyans, you realize every other Kenyan who is employed through either their SACCO, they have bought a plot of land somewhere and they intend to construct. And then the whole question comes in whether is it really a priority for them. And this is something that the government really needs to address. But from a personal perspective, I think matters of housing should not be a government agenda. This should be left to private sector. What government should do is just to have an enabling environment so that people can be able to build. That secretary who has saved over the years and has managed to get a plot in Kamulu or wherever, it will be possible for them to be able to actually construct a house on that particular plot. Make sure the infrastructure there is okay. Zero rate all the taxes for the building material, building equipment. That way, we are likely to achieve what the government intends to achieve without getting into a very acrimonious and murky issue. Yep.
Right, maybe we can just try and get granular with this and try to see also from the housing fund regulations, which were gazetted by Housing Cabinet Secretary James Macharia on December the 17th, 2018, revealing curious also elements about the funds that is one of the Jubilee's administration's so-called Big Four agenda for economic takeoff. They state a person who will be allocated a house will take it as a loan with a definite repayment period. The person will also need to buy and finance an unspecified insurance cover. These are some of the details that people also are questioning. What are these, right? And maybe also we can hear from Ali Karuri on this. From that particular regulation, you've attested to, and we've had most of you saying, yeah, public participation is a key component that is missing from this particular levy. But when we have such, questions that people are raising about insurance cover, they don't fully understand. What is the way to go?
Now, as we have agreed, almost all of us here, it's a noble idea. And the how-to, when it comes to the houses that are being built, the whole process of balloting and ensuring that you have a fair process of getting to the rightful beneficiaries is a very important process, because the houses are going to be a few compared to the number of contributors. So a criteria that is fair needs to be very, very clear. Now, when it comes to the final beneficiary, and a beneficiary is known and you are going to own a house, now there are certain normal processes that are required for purposes of ownership and matters of some legal transactions, matters of insurance. Those are necessary, but they have to be also affordable, and they need also not to add again to the costs. So that whole process of ownership to the very end, taking care of legal issues, legal costs, and ensuring that your property is secure is important. So the regulations that have been tabled in terms of the process of ownership to the very end follow the conventional methods of ownership. What is important is to ensure that they are basically very affordable, and they are very simple, not complicated, and you are secure. The property you have is secure in your hands. So that is what we need to guard using those regulations. The balloting and ensuring that the beneficiaries are the rightful people is important, because what happens, and we have seen, is that you have got something for public good, but the eventual beneficiaries are people who are not deserving. The real people who need to be to enjoy the benefit of this whole process eventually are out, and you get other people taking up these properties as beneficiaries, eventually passing them over for rental. So, and we have seen that happening. So we need to ensure that the targeted beneficiaries are real, and they eventually are found, and they enter into this process in the most simple way. Yeah.
All right. Let's hear from Mike.
Dibal, I think the first thing is that we need to respect our constitution.
Yes.
Because we are the ones who passed it en masse when it was promulgated in 2010. And the constitution is very clear in matters of legislation whereby you must call for public participation. Now, we are finding a very dangerous trend where government is muscling in some laws, either through miscellaneous amendments or through the finance bills every year. So every year there's an amendment to an existing law, either through the finance bill or through the miscellaneous amendment act. And that is not good, because the government is the first custodian of the Constitution, and it should basically lead the way in showing that it respects the rule of law. Now, in terms of the economics of it all, we have an informal sector. I have not seen a proposal to rope in the informal sector, apart from a proposed voluntary contribution. So if you're in the formal sector, you must contribute. If you're in the informal sector, you have a choice. So we are seeing a situation where this is not very well thought out.
Yes.
Take an example of a 53-year-old who's about to retire. The government retirement age is 60. You start contributing now. You get to 60. What happens to you? You've not contributed enough to get into that house. So there's a lot of issues that are coming through that we need to really, really think through. As we speak, Patrick mentioned the National Housing Corporation.
Yes.
The Housing Act, I think, was passed in the early or mid-60s. And generally that was supposed to take care of affordable housing. Now, as we speak, and this is where we are saying we are reading a lot of mischief. As we speak, there is a proposed amendment to the Housing Act to create, to make the NHC a collection point of this levy. And the amendment is sitting, waiting to go through the stages of Parliament. At the same time, you have Kenya Revenue Authority issuing a notice in the newspapers telling us we must contribute by 9th of May. Now, and we're asking ourselves, what legal instrument is KRA using? And why is there so much of a hurry to implement this? We know we are not ready for implementation. We know we are overburdening the employer. Our employees are going to ask us what we are doing as employers to look after their interests. So there's all these issues that have not really been addressed. And had we then gone for public participation, because this was passed in June last year, by now would have come up with necessary solutions and ideas, because as has been repeated here, and we'll repeat it again, we do really support the government Big Four agenda, and we want the government to succeed. But we don't want it to start something like this, then it falls flat on its face.
Thank you, thank you. Right, we want to take a short break right now. And when we circle back, of course, we continue with the conversation. I like how also the business, not really the Business Daily, but the People Daily has actually asked tough questions. And this is what is a splash today on the front page of the People Daily. Tough questions as housing levy blocked, tax burden. The Gazette notice effecting deduction this month draws anger protest by both employers and employees, even as court holds order pending determination of the case before it. And this is all, of course, tucked away on page 17 of the People Daily this morning. Maybe I can try and zoom in and just try to see what the questions are here. Will be a bit tacky out there, but there you go. What Kenyans want to know, right? And this is what we're discussing this morning before, of course, before we take this short break. Why is deterrence for those mandated to manage the funds so lenient in case of misappropriation of contribution? They want to know about the safeguards against fraud. Allocation of house. What is the guarantee contributors will be allocated a house or full refund of contributions plus accrued interest? That is another abiding question. Forced contribution. Why should the state force salaried persons to contribute if they are servicing a home loan or already have a house? Job security. Will employers absorb cost of a contribution without laying off workers or slashing other benefits? Why now? And that is the probing question everyone is asking. What is a tearing rush? As we've heard also from Mike, who is a board member at the FKE. Why is a tearing rush? We know we don't have the legal instrument so far, even for KRA to actually be collecting this particular revenue so far. So what legal instruments are they using? So that is the question also that we'll put it also to the Principal Secretary, Charles Hinga, who's just confirmed yes, he's still coming. We're eagerly waiting for him to come here and we see, yes, why also did they defy court orders? We know there was a stay order for them not to try and get these deductions as from May the 9th. But why did they go full steam ahead and announce that that will begin? That is another question. We'll put it to the Principal Secretary. Don't go away. Fan is the subject, and you can head over to a Twitter handle, which is AM Live NTV, AM Live NTV, our profile name on Facebook, and 20686, our SMS portal. I've created first time this morning with Lee Karuri, who is a resort and cities chairman, also a consummate architect. Also with us is Patrick Obath, who is the vice chair of KEPSA Foundation and also managing partner at Adam Smith International. We do have with us as well Stanley Manduku, who is an advocate of the High Court. Also, we're joined by Mike Masharia, who is a board member at the Federation of Kenya Employers. And also joining us this morning is the Principal Secretary, Ministry of Transport and Housing. This is Charles Hinga. Right, let's just get to discuss this. And of course, Charles, you've joined us. First of all, there was this stay order. Why did the government go full steam ahead and say we're effecting, the deductions as from May the 9th?
Thank you very much, Dibal, and good morning to your viewers, and good morning to my fellow panelists. Dibal, there were two court cases at the Labour Court and several others that are at the Constitutional Court and the High Court.
Yes.
The two court cases at the Labour Court had injunctions. There were no orders on the other court cases at the Constitutional and High Court. They have got dates that have been set for those cases to be argued out. Now, the two cases at the Labour Court, one was by FKE that challenged the establishment of an advisory board that we had established for the management of the contributions of the members' monies. And the second one was by COTU, of which FKE was an interested party. We settled with FKE on their main court case of the advisory board, and that was withdrawn and filed in court and deemed as settled. Mm-hmm. We also, COTU was not opposing this housing fund. As a matter of fact, they supported this housing fund because once they understood the fundamentals and how workers were bound to benefit from the housing fund, they actually were very supportive. Their only issue was that we had published the regulations, and yet, because of from a labor movement perspective, there is no taxation, as they say, without representation. So once we closed the gap with COTU, we settled, there was a consent, and that consent was filed, and the matter was deemed settled. Mm-hmm. Now, FKE as an interested party, and there is precedence, and there's precedence on this, that if the main litigant or the main plaintiff withdraws a case, then that case cannot survive beyond that, because otherwise how are you going to force people who have settled and agreed to still have a court case? So that is why we found it very strange, with respect to what FKE had raised. Mm-hmm. FKE issues had been raised before. And remember, this has been a process, including the finance bill. And they submitted their comments. The main issue was that this establishment of the Housing Act, of the Housing Fund, mm-hmm. did not go through public participation. And we responded, because this Housing Fund is not new. This Housing Fund was established in 1967 in the Housing Act, Cap 117. Mm-hmm. And all we did was to operationalize this fund. Now, the process of operationalization of the fund went through very intense public participation. That was our response. We published the regulations and we got very many comments, of which, if you look at the regulations that were published in November last year, vis-a-vis the regulations that were gazetted in December, there's fundamental differences, because through the public participation, we listened to what Kenyans were saying. For example, there was an ineligibility criteria that was there in the previous version, which basically knocked out anybody who earned more than 100,000. If you look at the published regulations, everybody who contributes will benefit. So, I mean, that is just citing one of the many of the changes that took place.
Right.
So as far as we are concerned, the matter was settled, and that's why we went and proceeded to now, embark on the process of asking employers to remit.
Right. We have Mike here. You can actually confirm. So what he says that this particular case was pulled out by Kotu?
Yes, so the two court cases have been
And the FKE had enjoined Kotu in this particular case, isn't it?
Yes, but they were a main litigant in their own case, okay, of which the judge that was presiding over this court case had combined the cases to be heard as one, and said, you guys go and find each other, right, settle, and then file that consent. So with the FKE, the issue was the advisory board, and it was published even in your own media, withdrawn. So we withdrew from the. So
the Federation of Kenya had issues with the Housing Fund Advisory Board.
They did.
The nominations that in it as well.
Right.
Yes. So what he says is actually it is maybe it rendered the case null and void if court really pulled out on this and then you had enjoined on this particular case. Is that the case? Or what is the true picture?
Okay, we have legal counsel here, and he will guide us. But first of all, we were not enjoined as interested parties after the fact. We went in right at the onset with Kotu. If you look at the court papers, you will find that Kotu has filed a petition. We did not see it fit to file a similar petition. So we went in and filed the petition together as interested parties. So we were in it with Kotu right from the word go. Now, if then the government and Kotu have reached an agreement, that agreement did not involve FKE. And it is true what the PS is saying, that if the main litigant withdraws, then the interested party has no ground to stand on. But remember, this is a constitutional issue. It's a matter of public interest. And if one person sees it fit to withdraw, it doesn't mean that the interests of the public have been taken care of. And that's where we are. The matter of public interest has not still been addressed, the issue of public participation. And that's where we should look at. If you go to the advisory board, yes, we did file a petition in court.
Yes.
And we withdrew it after the notice was withdrawn. And that element is settled. Now, the issue of the housing fund under the Housing Act of 67, it is there. We agree. But you can read the act yourself and identify where it says employers and employees will contribute. It doesn't. It says that there shall be a fund established, and it is up to NHC and the other bodies to go and look for that money. It may be coming from government, it may be coming from donors, it may be coming from partners. So I think it's good to let the public in on the whole truth.
All right.
Yeah, let's not give 50% of the information.
Right. Stanley, we have, of course, the Principal Secretary saying that there was a public participation on this. And maybe the question we'll put it to him is, first of all, what medium did you use to actually disseminate this information for public participation? Because it seems the Kenyan populace is really none the wiser as far as the whole fund is concerned. So what avenues did you use? And in terms of what you're hearing on the legal playouts, the litigant, pulling out, and FKE, and what he says right now is this is a matter of a public good. So it takes precedence. Even if the litigant pull out of this particular case, where are we left at as far as the courts are concerned?
Okay. I think the first thing is that I've not had the benefit of looking at the various court papers that were filed in court. And so my advice will just be generally on such issues. People go to court, yeah? And they craft their pleading based on what they consider to be the cause of action. When you look at the matter before us, you realize that there are quite a number of interests. We have got COFEC, it had its own interests. We have got FKE, it has got its own interest. We had KOTU and all these other players. We have a principle whereby if there's a matter before a court, and based on that action, there are quite a number of people who are challenging it. And in order to save judicial time and to make sure that we don't have different decisions from the different courts, we have got a concept of consolidation of these issues, of these suits, so that all the issues that have been presented by the various players or the various parties to the case can be canvassed and a final position given. Whether the issue that FKE was challenging was the issue of the advisory board, whether that matter was settled, the base upon which the act was withdrawn, it does not mean that there are no other issues of concern by other parties. And a court will always decide a case based on the pleadings before it and the evidence that has been tendered. It may be true that the issue of the advisory board, which ached FKE to go to court, was resolved by the withdrawal of that particular notice. But the concerns of COFEC have not been dealt with. The concerns of KOTU maybe have not been effectively dealt with. Even any other Kenyan can be able to approach a court by dint of the rights under the Constitution and actually question any action of government. So I may say that in that particular broad framework, and in view of the fact that we really do not know what cause of action took who to court in that respect,
Yes.
and based on what you've read in the newspapers and what you've had and the concerns that are being raised, it is very clear that there is still some aspects that the courts need to make a determination upon. That's why even I'm told as late as yesterday, we still have an injunction that was issued. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Right.
And then on the issue of, he raised something to do with the act and the regulation. One thing I have to say is that a regulation is what we call subsidiary legislation. And in the hierarchy of enforcement of laws, when we start with the Constitution, then we have the substantive law, that is the act, and then thereafter we have a regulation. A regulation cannot purport to contradict a main provision of the legislation. And when it comes to matters of taxes or matters of levy, it would have been neater if all these were contained in the main act, so that even if the regulations come to operationalize it, there are no aspects of contradicting with the main legislation. I think that's what I may want to say.
Right. Let's hear from Patrick Obas.
I think I'll go back to what I'd said earlier, Anna PS. The Housing Act was actually a derivative of the Central Housing Board, which was established in the 50s. And it had a very clear purpose of giving affordable low-cost housing. And then it was amended in 1967 to now create the National Housing Corporation. And in that process, they put in certain provisions at that point in time. Fast forward now to the 21st century. The ways of funding housing have changed substantially from 1967. And there are other opportunities which can fund housing, and also the definitions. I mean, if you look at the regulations, that sort of had bands of people sort of, affordable housing, support for housing, and so forth and so on at different levels. Go back to NSSF. NSSF was doing exactly that by providing cheap housing through the NSSF fund, and which I am happy to report I actually stopped because NSSF's business was not doing housing. Its business was managing pensions, right? But they have a pot of money. Currently, the NSSF has got about 180 billion shillings. And pension funds in the country have got over $1 trillion. Now, if this is a good social initiative, why can't we tap into those funds? Because rather than try and create a new fund, you can actually legislate that a certain amount of all those pensions and everything else can be on-loaned into a pot, which can then be used to fund housing on a returnable basis, right? And instead of raising, say, if you say 10% of NSSF or 20% of it, and that then is loaned out at, say, 5% to the National Housing Corporation, right? I'm already contributing to NSSF.
Yes.
So it simply means that the money that I've contributed is being used to work something else for my own benefit, because my pension is going to be in another 50 years. So for the lifetime of the loan that I require for a house, the money that I'm putting in NSSF can actually work for me in that area. And I think we just need to be creative in terms of where we get the money, rather than adding another levy to an already overburdened Kenyan. We can try and do it differently and achieve exactly the same thing using funds that are already available. And I just think that we need to sort of just go and think differently. And also the issue of how it is done. And as I said earlier, you can put up affordable housing, get people to rent at the level that they're at, and you actually grade them according to the rental opportunities for people. The guys on minimum wages need certain types of houses. They won't live in high-rise properties in the middle of town. They live somewhere else. And then you get infrastructure to bring them to work. Guys at a different income level will require different kind of housing. And once all that is done and thought through and put together, then I'm sure everybody would be happy. But I think the issue of adding another levy when there is funding that is sitting there that is waiting for investment, I think was disingenuous. I think the idea is great, but I think let's just try and think outside the box and do it differently.
Right. Let's say from Lee before we come to the principal secretary.
Just the focus on the housing fund. Somehow we have made it look like this will be the only way out in terms of funding the housing. And the idea is very good. But we need to look at the circles. Today, one of the fastest ways we are going to deliver this housing is to using existing successful models.
Yes.
And they really support them, give them incentives, and convert them into the system of delivery of homes. SACCOs in this country today have become, in fact, models around Africa for purposes of saving and delivering housing for ordinary people, where they are already well organized. And what will one of the ways to do it, because we are looking at how to galvanize funds for purposes of housing, is to identify credible SACCOs that have got a track record, work with them, and help them to be primary deliverers of homes. You will find that SACCOs in this country are going to maybe do the bigger job of housing delivery than all these other efforts we have. They are good, but I believe that the fastest road to market will be the SACCOs. I think what we have done is that we have ignored what we already have. And we have spent a lot of time creating new systems. What we need is both. Create the new system, make it work, because this creates a new opportunity.
Yes.
And then make the housing fund work, address all the issues that have been brought, including governance issues.
Yes.
You see, there's a lot of fear now around management of public funds. That's one of the biggest fears people have. Sometimes they may express this fear through other means. But one of the biggest fears is that this could be another fund where we are not accountable anymore. Our money will be lost. I'll never get my money out. I don't know where we shall end. But those issues need to be addressed. But the SACCO route, savings through the SACCO, providing support to the SACCOs, coming up with about, say, 50 SACCOs that are large, credible, are well-governed, support them,
Thank you.
give them targets. We are going to go very far.
We're going to go very far.
Yes.
Maybe you can respond to some of this, and maybe also to just tap into what Patrick was saying.
Yep.
Aside from NSSF, also there is an unclaimed asset as well. And we know Treasury had announced that 3 billion shillings, has not been claimed in this country, and that and I know much more has actually. It's actually around the 250.
About 20 billion.
20 billion right now, right? Since they actually reported 3 billion, it has risen to 22 billion. So what are we doing to such funds, which we know people have not really claimed so far? And what is the mechanism around it? Can we tap into this instead of coming to Kenyans again yeah, to dig deeper into their pockets.
Right. So thank you, Dibal. And I want to, let me just litigate the issues that have been raised first, and then I respond to that.
Okay.
So the first issue is that my friend from FKE raises is the legitimacy of the employer-employee contribution. The same Housing Act which I have seen he's opened, in Section 6 of that Housing Act says that there shall also be paid to the corporation and carried to the housing fund all such monies as may from time to time be voted or appropriated by Parliament. This went through a parliamentary process. There was a vote. We can discuss and debate about how that vote was. Today we have a Finance Act of 2018, of which these monies were voted. That's number one. Number two, allow me also to read some case law in terms of the precedents. There was a case by ZMS and another director of public prosecution and two others in 2014. And the land judge made the following pertinent observation. He says that if the substantive parties to the petition have seen no need to compromise it, how can a secondary party, the interested party, strong as his interest may be, force them to revive it? I see no logic nor any law that will grant me jurisdiction to force them to relitigate a matter they considered closed at the behest of an outsider to the principal issues of the litigants. I rest that issue there. Now, let me then come to my friend Chairman. We have looked at all options. The pension funds, we've got a couple of limitations. One, as much as they are swimming in cash, like NSSF I think has almost close to 300 billion shillings today. The statute today does not allow them, first of all, to invest more than 30% into one class. Secondly, we have a systemic issue, which is they invest majority of their money through listed instruments. Today, a T-bill is at what, 12, 13%? How are we going to build houses at 12, 13% and make them affordable? And bearing in mind that we still have other issues of land, which is obscenely expensive, cost of construction, and so on and so forth. So our pension funds are part of the solution, but not the main solution. They are going to become bulk off-takers when these houses are built. We have two fundamental issues. We have a challenge on the supply side, and we have a challenge on the demand side. If we address one and don't address the other, we're still not going to resolve the problem. So, on the supply side, what are the challenges that we have? On the supply side, today, and my brother here is a developer, if we were to ask him today that he goes and construct houses for people earning less than 50,000 shillings and takes a view on them, he'll tell us to get lost. He will rather target you and I who earn over 150,000, knows we can go to the bank and get a mortgage. Now, here are the shocking statistics. 73% of all formerly employed Kenyans earn less than 50,000 shillings. 95% of all formerly employed Kenyans earn less than 100,000 shillings. We are the minority. So therefore, if the Constitution under Article 43, subsection 1B, where Kenyans spoke, and in fact, it's so affirmative because those are the freedoms that we confer to ourselves. And we said that every Kenyan, not some Kenyans, every Kenyan has a right to housing and adequate housing. And of course, services. We need to ask ourselves the question, how then are we going to finance those rights? To me, and this is because we will rather discuss facts. In my view, there are four ways of doing it. A, we can tell Treasury to go borrow the money. 500,000 houses are going to cost 1.3 trillion shillings. So they can go borrow the money. Two, they can go and issue sovereign guarantees. A sovereign guarantee is as good as debt. It's going to add to our indebtedness. Number three, They can raise taxes for Kenyans. Now, Robin Hood tax, okay, Dibal,
Yes.
means that when your payroll today, your PAYE, you do not have a direct right to that, because we use that money to build a house in Lodwar or somewhere else, perhaps a place you'll never be able to go, or provide last mile connectivity to somebody using your taxes. The fourth one is the PPP model. Now, the PPP model, and this is what, if you look at the manifestos of the two main parties in the last election, they all had provision of affordable housing. Incidentally, they all said we were going to provide 500,000 houses. They told Kenyans that. And both of them said we are going to do it through PPP, because they all knew the challenges we have in our borrowings and taxes. Therefore, the question that we should be asking ourselves is, how do you create a PPP framework? That is, because in this case, you're asking an investor to put in their cash. And how are they going to get paid? Now, that is my forte. That's my background. My background is on project finance and PPP. And I have done a couple of them. But let's just look at one that we have done very successfully. We build our roads using a PPP framework. What do we have? We have a fuel levy that goes into a fund. We build SGR. We have got a railway levy where we are putting in that money. That fund becomes ring-fenced, and it becomes the object of off-taking, and therefore immunizing the investor from the market risk. That is why they call it a PPP. Public is doing something. In our case, we are providing land. We are providing infrastructure. We are not building the houses. The private sector is going to come and invest, build the houses, and when the houses are ready, the fund is going to buy. So I would like us to confine ourselves to, if these constitutional rights that we confer to ourselves are still valid, if Vision 2030 that talks about by 2030 we will have to be a mid-economy country, that we ought to provide ourselves, with decent houses as one of the many social and economic rights, then the question that we should be debating here today is, how do we get there? I like some of the ideas that are coming out there. Perhaps we need to expand the scope, but our view was the contribution. And why the contribution? Because the contribution confers a direct right to you. You either get a house. If you don't get a house and retire, you get back your money. Two, if you don't, the earlier of retirement of 15 years, you get back your money. In the process, you still retain the right on how that money is used. You can elect to assign that benefit or confer that benefit to your son, so that when they come out of university, they have a degree and they have a house. If all of
I think we need to look at a larger part of the population.
Okay.
I think where you're looking at is a very narrow section. I think there's different models that can happen. If you go outside of the urban areas, and I think we've been focusing on employed people, which is how many people? Almost, in the formal sector is only about what? 2.4 million, right? The informal sector is another 16, right? So if you look at the informal sector, which is spread across the whole country, and I said earlier on, if we go for interlocking blocks and stuff like that, get communities to actually start building houses in those areas, spread across the whole country, right? No PPP, nothing. Just communities empowered with technology, which they can use and be trained to do that, right? We could build a hell of a lot more houses for the country.
And we're doing that.
Right? Now, that is not even coming out, right? And that really needs to be the focus in terms of where we can spend money and get the best impact.
So we to do that, you need a hydroform machine.
Exactly.
We were previously buying hydroform machines from South Africa, which were about 8 odd million. We have gone to numerical machines.
Yes.
Thank you. We've got numerical machines that has made now a Kenyan-made hydroform machine,
right,
which you're distributing.
I'm aware of that.
Yes.
That has not been brought up.
And then I agree. It
is not out,
but
and that is
available.
that's the biggest
And by the way,
contributor.
even in rural areas, we will still finance you, because you still need
Exactly.
to finance you to get a house. And here is a financing package, because so I finish this part. Is that
very briefly, because we need to hear also from Macharia.
You get, under this package, through this contribution, and you'll allow me to talk about the SACCO side. The contributions that you're making allows us to provide mortgages at 3% for those who are in the social housing. You spoke about categories. We have classified Kenyans based on income. So social housing earning less than 20,000, you get 3% interest, 25 years to pay. That can only be made possible through this contributory fund. 2, low-cost housing to mortgage gap, you get up to 7%. That is how we are bringing down the cost, plus 25 years. The
That's 25
SACCOs,
or 15 years?
Up to 25. Okay. And by the way, we do even multi-generational. So if 25 years is not enough and your son comes and picks up, we are flexible. Now, on the SACCO, to finish...
Just hold on the SACCO, because now we need to hear from these other guys as well. Mike, I saw you straining at the leash also to say something.
The reason why I'm smiling, first of all, is that maybe PS, you were not here when I said we support the Big Four agenda. The reason why I'm smiling is that we are having this conversation on live TV, which we should have had a long time ago through public participation. And we are hearing that public participation is not important. But now the PS tells us
No,
he likes
there was public participation.
Yeah, he likes the ideas. Now,
and we met with you as well.
yeah, we did. We had a function at one of the hotels
Not
here.
a function. You even met with your CEO in our office.
Now, the other thing is, the PS has, told us that Parliament legislated. We were watching that clip about how Parliament legislated that law, where the ayes were louder than the nays and the ayes had it. Yeah, is that really legislating?
There is a lot.
Yeah. So let's be sincere and let's be let's tell Kenyans the truth. Secondly, he's picked out some judicial precedent here, and the judge there has not said anything that is not the position of the law. It is the position of the law that, and I said that when the main litigant withdraws, the interested party is left holding the baby. But we are talking, and I repeat, of a matter of
Public interest.
great public interest
Yes.
through the Constitution, and we need to respect the Constitution. I know we are running out of time. The employer does not get their money back. We're talking about employees getting their money back. The employer under the scheme does not get their money back. What are they contributing to?
You don't get money back because you have an obligation to provide housing.
Exactly.
Now, Section 30 of the Employment Act.
and that obligation is the one that we want to discuss.
All right.
Yeah, we can't have it imposed upon us simply because Parliament legislated.
Or the law requires you to.
Is it the law? The law requires us. Yeah, it does.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, let's hear from Stanley Mandugo.
Yeah, I think what is emerging, I think the PS has brought in quite a number of insights on the various considerations that was going through them. But one of the biggest challenges that we must accept is what we had started with earlier, social acceptance. For any of our project this magnitude to take off, then there has to be social acceptance. And the concerns that are being raised by the Kenyan public need to be effectively handled. I do not know the form of public participation that was undertaken, but even that public participation must be effective. In that, the issues or the questions that are being raised by the various stakeholders must be able to be addressed conclusively and properly. Now, there are people who are wondering whether this is a priority in terms of the existing situations that we find ourselves in. There are people also who are asking about the issue of the guarantee of that particular benefit. Mm-hmm. And then there's a large number of Kenyans who have their own homes, who are having a good house allowance. They can be able to meet that particular obligation. And others actually who have plots, and they'll want to actually develop these particular plots. And it is not very clear what mechanism or what policies the government is putting in place so that they can be able to actually develop these particular plots and so that they can be able to achieve the ultimate obligation of owning a home, which is one of the key issues that the government is trying to address. And then the other issue is that for this to be effective, you realize that one of the challenges that we have is the question of land in terms of the pricing. And what policies have been put in place in by government so as to ensure that even those people who may want to develop the lands by themselves, they can be able to get affordable land, and also the ensuing construction that is affordable? Are they going to have tax cuts? Are we going to have other forms of subsidies that are going to be put in place and all that, so that even the people who are opposing this particular project, based on the fact that they already have their own homes or they have their own plots that they want to develop and all that, yeah, they'll be able to come on board, yeah, so that we see the benefit that is going to arise from this particular fund.
All right. So
just a quick rejoinder on the obligation to provide housing and the Employment Act. CBAs have house allowance, and we do that.
mm-hmm. You do that.
Yeah, we do.
Lee, you have a question for the Principal Secretary?
Can I answer his whatever first, because I think he made some very good points. The SACCO.
The SACCOs.
The SACCOs.
Yes, please.
Absolutely right. SACCOs are a big option. In fact, they provide more mortgages or houses than our financial institutions. I think the last statistic we read was about 70,000 houses have been delivered through the SACCO model, while the financial institution, we're talking about 25,000. Now, the challenge with the SACCO model, and we are addressing it as this, so this, I don't know why there is almost like an obsession only with the housing fund. There's other things. So the SACCOs, the challenge with the SACCO model is the way we build houses with SACCOs is we come together, tunachanga, right? We buy land. The SACCO lends you money, you repay that money, right? Then you go and borrow more money to now put up your top structure. You finish repaying again after your top structure, you go and borrow to do your finishes. Now, it takes you 7 to 9 years to do that.
Yes.
And also, the money is expensive because it's short-term money, all right? So what we are doing is that we have established Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company. What is this institution going to do? It is going to refinance the SACCOs. So they originate the mortgages, and instead of giving you 7 years to pay, they give you 20 to 25 years to pay, number one. Number two, we give you access to cheap money that Kenyan government has actually borrowed, about $300 million or 30 billion, that we are providing as credit lines to SACCOs and financial institutions to be able to provide you with cheaper mortgages so that the interest is now at single digit and it is fixed. So that is not something we're talking about, but that is already law. The KMRC, 31st of March, we closed the window where SACCOs joined in. We raised 1.2 billion from SACCOs and banks, and it is a member club. So in other words, if you're not a shareholder of KMRC, you will not be able to benefit from the $300 million to on-lend. So those things, we are addressing them. There is a whole lot more, but that we are able to do because we also have these stream of cash flows, right, where we are not talking about treasury bills which are 12%. We have to look for ways of getting cheaper ways of financing these houses.
Right.
So it is a whole, not just one part. And just on the land policies that he has raised, we are making land available to the developers at no cost to develop them. That is already, it's law, by the way, approved by cabinet. It went through public participation. It was commented widely by professionals, and it is still open for you to go and comment. Two, we are opening up land, even private land. So if you're a private land owner and you have land but there is no infrastructure, we are providing you with the infrastructure so that we open up your land and you build affordable housing and the fund buys. So there is a whole lot more. And and there is stamp duties for first-time homeowners is zero rated now. And as a lawyer, that is huge.
Thank you.
For homeowners.
Right. Maybe I need to get clarification because also earlier we had in the Business Daily showing this particular story that Rotich admits housing fund tax error in budget because the initial was a 0.05%,
yes.
Right? And also it read here the Kenyans in informal employment will not contribute 1% of their pay to the Housing Development Fund as indicated in the finance bill, but will instead pay 0.5%. Treasury Secretary Henry Rotich said this. He described the 1% charge to the fund contained in the finance bill as a typographical mistake that will be corrected as it goes through Parliament. What really changed?
Because I cannot comment on, you have to get the CS here. To stand by those. But the initial, whatever was 0.5.
But my train of thought is this. This is where we get all this confusion. Because ideally, even I myself, I thought it was 0.05%.
So the 0.5%.
Then we went again full steam ahead to 1.5%.
So
he admits here it was a mistake.
No, it wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. We, as a housing ministry or housing department, submitted to Treasury 2.5%. Treasury, because it's 2.5 employer, 2.5 employee. When they did their numbers at the time, okay, and given that we're also going through excise duty, for, M-Pesa and all those other charges, then they had come up with 0.5. 0.5, in our view, was so little that it was not going to have the kind of impact. So when the bill went to Parliament, it went in at 0.5, which is what National Treasury had submitted. But you know that between first reading and second reading, you can actually make changes. And we submitted the changes, went through the budget committee. Those changes are the ones now that were debated. The only issue that happened in Parliament is when the first one was tabled, the 0.5, there was a lot of noise, so they never even got to the 1.5. When the president sent the memorandum on 1.5, it was not the president who introduced the 1.5. The 1.5 was already introduced between the first reading and second reading and recorded as such. It is in the Parliament. So there is no mistake that was made. It's only that there was a we came from 2.5 to 0.5, we settled at 1.5. And the 1.5, by the way, was actually debated and agreed upon even with COTU. All right? Okay, we spoke with FKE. We met with FKE, okay? They had issues. Their issues they kept on raising was public participation, okay? That was the main issue that they kept on raising, even after we met with them.
But I'm interested, how did the public participation work out? So where did you hold this public participation?
So, Dibal, public participation, is not one event, okay? So this thing started 2016. We have a housing survey where Kenyans said what kind of houses they want. That one is public document. There is a housing policy, but this particular one started with the budget making process. And everybody, when the budget was put out, the finance bill was put out, Kenyans commented, and we answered the questions. Then we came to the regulations. The regulations were published in media, they were published in our portal, and we received comments from labor unions, from employers. We received a lot of comments, and we took those comments into consideration. We have had many forums, and let me just put it this way, that there is a court case today, all right, that is going to determine whether there was adequate public participation.
Thank you.
So I would rather we leave it there so that they are the ones who can debate as to whether we did enough public participation.
On the area of governance, one of the key areas of focus right now by public is on the use of public funds. Looking at the history we have had with NSSF, NHIF, issues with the youth fund. All these are public funds meant for public good, but we have run into problems with management. In fact, now mismanagement has happened, money has been lost, and public confidence has eroded. How are you addressing that so that it's watertight and we do not have eventualities where the fears right now about potential misuse of these funds actually happens? It's a very big concern with the corruption issues, and what are the systems that will safeguard this fund, not just now, but into the future?
Right, so this fund, and that's why we set up the advisory board. And again, they litigated, okay, something that I thought was good, because we were trying to introduce even more openness and governance. By FKE sitting in the advisory board, by KEPSA, which we invited you to sit in the board, by the Bankers Association, by COTU, by NAT sitting in the advisory board, it means that we have, and you have the option of electing men and women of integrity. Because KEPSA, we were not dictating who you're going to employ, who you're going to second. But then it was shut down by FKE. Now, what we have is what is in the statute. And the statute limits the number of board members that we can have for the national housing. So these are some of the challenges that we're having, that even when we should be talking to each other and say, what did you have in mind? We are trying to bring in the confidence of Kenyans. And then the second thing is that money is not going to be managed by National Housing Corporation. There was a tender issued yesterday, the day before yesterday. You saw it. The custodial services, the fund managers. This money is not going to sit somewhere where people are taking it. And by the way, and this should give you comfort, there will be no drawdown of 1 single cent unless the housing unit is completed. And that housing unit, there will be no changes in pricing because we have fixed the buying price.
Right.
So there's enough in there to give you comfort that there's no manga stuff that is going to go.
All right, just a moment. Yeah, so we're just about to wind up, but there are key pertinent questions that also need to be addressed. First of all, with the Housing Fund Advisory Board, who nominates the people that should be actually in this particular board, and what is the criteria that you're using that we have in this particular board? Secondly, there is a penalty for employers. If they don't meet this particular monthly deductions, then they will be penalized. The government are known not to actually be paying even the suppliers, who are some of his employers here that we know, for the longest time ever. So how is that going to be addressed? And maybe we can also pick some other questions and put it to the peers. Patrick Obath, as we're preparing also to give your headline thoughts. Masharia?
Yeah. Very quickly, about the advisory board. Our feeling was that how can we agree on a secondary issue if we've not sorted out the primary problem? And that was a premise at which we rejected the advisory board, because we need to agree on the mechanics. If you are rushing to amend the Housing Act, why didn't you amend that particular section if it's not if it's constitutional? And as we speak, and I said Dibal, there is a proposed amendment to the Housing Act that proposes that NHC should be collecting that money.
There's no amendment.
Yeah, I've seen it somewhere.
There's no amendment.
Yeah, and we'll pull it out later.
All right.
So generally what we are saying is that public participation is not about, it's not a political statement. It's not something that we feel good about that we did.
Thank you.
It's about sharing ideas.
Right, thank you.
And that's what we want to do.
Right, Patrick, you got your last question or maybe
Yeah,
a
no,
contribution?
mine is just a matter of process, and it's not just with this ministry, it's with the whole of the government. In terms of creating new legislation and new ideas, it is done in like a small closed room with a few technical experts within government. And then it is brought to us as a finished product. Your comments on what we want to do. The public participation would be a lot more effective if we say we have an idea. Come and sit down. Let us craft it together. And then work with it together all the way through to the finalization. We did this once with the Petroleum Act in 2001, where it was done jointly, all the way through. And it is one of the few places where the ERC is properly funded. You name it, the works, everything works. And it is supported by the whole industry. What was difficult about doing that?
Thank you.
As a process?
Right, Stanley, your last one. Also, that will act as your
one of the
thoughts.
issues that maybe I want the PS to really address is the issue, what are the mechanisms that they're going to put in place to support people who already own plots and they'll want to develop? Because that's one issue that has not really come out, and it's one of the concerns that quite a number of people are raising.
Right. Maybe, Lee, you've got your final question as we're winding up?
Yeah, we are looking at the role of the developers and the private sector to ensure that we are completely involved in this process. A lot of the developers at the moment are still looking the entry point. How do we participate and ensure that existing developers are fully engaged and find adequate space, incentives to really do their very best around this?
Right. Answer those questions very briefly because we are we're stuck for time.
All right. Okay. Thank you so much.
Very briefly.
My brother Patrick, actually we developed this structure together with the private sector. In the PIU, which is a project implementation unit, which is ordinarily supposed to be a government institution, KEPSA sitting there, Kenya Association of Manufacturers sitting there. We meet every Tuesday. So there's none of these ideas that are being done in a corner by a small group. We have had so many forums where we've called the financial institutions, everybody, insurance company, pension funds, and we shared with them and they gave us their ideas and we did it. So to be quite fair, and as I said, this is going to be litigated somewhere else as to whether there was adequate public participation. Stanley, and he was my senior, he was my house captain when I was a Form 1. So thanks for not asking very difficult questions. But the issue of the mechanism of how plot owners, again, are well defined in the development framework guideline. window 1 closed 14th of February, window 2 is open now. If you got a plot of land, you go submit it now in the portal bomayangu.go.ke/AHP. And then we are going to partner you with people that have got the capital and the developers who want to execute, and the fund will buy the units when they are ready.
Thank you.
Lastly,
the last one.
The last one for my brother Lee, the role of the developers. There is a lot of incentives. We worked with KPDA. They've given us last year, which some of the things that we were affected, and now we are working on even more. For example, the most painful tax for you is the cash flow tax, which is VAT, and that is what we want to litigate this year in terms of reducing VAT on inputs.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Charles Zinger, who is the Principal Secretary, Minister of Transport and Housing. We thank you for coming through this morning to actually shed light on this. Lee Karuri, who is the Chairman of Resorts and the Cities, and also consummate architect, thank you for coming through as well. We want to thank you also Mike Macharia, who's a board member at the Kenya Federation of Kenya Employers. Thank you. Stanley Manduki, who is an advocate of the High Court. Thank you for coming through as well. And Patrick Obath, who is the Vice Chair of KEPSA Foundation and also Managing Partner at Adam Smith International. Thank you for coming through. Lots of tweets, I can see them. My director, she's telling me I'm under the gun. I cannot read all of this. But Diana, just one of them, so that I'm not in trouble with the viewers as well. We have Dennis Odala actually still on public participation, saying public participation ain't even an issue. There is the whole idea that this is not feasible, he said. He says that. And then we have now the public is participating and invited, and we say a big no. Government of Kenya should consider playing a blackjack on the streets on a portable cartoon. Let's drop the pretense. That's what Kanye Gyoko is saying. Those are your reactions, many of them on social media, but we really appreciate also you driving the show with us this morning, and thank you to our panelists for shedding light on this as well. So this is a developing story. We'll put tails on it, and of course we shall also be giving you details of what is developing as well as far as the National Housing Fund Levy is concerned. My name is Dibala Nair. Have a lovely day.